Go ahead and get started. Can we have the roll?
Greg Strike.
Here.
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Aaron O'Quinn.
Here.
Radhika Krishna.
Here.
Scott Poulos.
Here.
Jeff Ron.
Here.
Jim Winchester and Matt Dimick are excused. Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to the minutes, is there a motion to approve? Oh, I gotta figure out my motions. So moved by Commissioner O'Quinn, seconded by Commissioner Ron. Any objection? No objection. That motion is approved. Next up are disclosures. Commissioner Poulos?
No disclosures.
Commissioner O'Quinn?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Spinelli?
Yeah, I was absent from the 11th, 8th meeting, so I was not voting on those minutes. And I have listened to the audio for case 2021-0122, so I am able to participate if needed.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Spinelli. Commissioner Krishna?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Ron?
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Strike?
Yes, on the items on 11-1-21, 4 resolutions, 2021-032, 33, 34, and 35. I was not present, so I would be abstaining.
Thank you, Commissioner Strike, and no disclosures from myself. Next item of business is the election of officers. We are currently without a vice chair. We will need to determine a new vice chair. We can either have discussion or if anybody has anyone that they would like to move as the vice chair. Oh, Commissioner Ron, I didn't see you in the queue there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've appreciated my short tenure on the commission. I don't think it's quite long enough for me to participate in the role of vice chair. However, there are 2 longer-standing members sitting to my right who I think would be ideal candidates, perhaps both of them. Noting that both can't fill the role of vice chair, I'll start immediately to my right and ask Commissioner Krishna if she would be interested in taking on the role.
Okay, so that is a motion to nominate Commissioner Krishna as the vice chair. Is there a second? By Commissioner O'Quinn. Other than Commissioner Ron's comments with his motion, is anyone any discussion on this motion? I'll just note before any vote that it appears that Commissioner Krishna has expressed willingness to take this role. And for speaking for myself, in the time that I have been on the commission with Commissioner Krishna, I have full confidence in her ability to well serve in that role. Okay, or Commissioner Poulos, did you have a...
I was kind of debating just asking the question if she was interested also, but since she is, I just want to say that I agree she'd be a pretty good vice chair.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll call for a vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
And Radhika, you can vote.
Okay, that motion passes. Congratulations to Commissioner, now Vice Chair Krishna. Next up is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Krishna, seconded by Commissioner O'Quinn. Any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion passes. And then moving on to unfinished business. First item up is E1, case number 2021-1111.
Yes, this is a continuation of the Title 21 text amendment to the R2 zone's height and bulk standards. On November 1, the commission closed the public hearing and voted to continue the case until the issue response summary, responding to some of the questions commissioners had and the public comments could be provided by the planning department. The issue response summary is provided in the December 6th meeting packet, and you should have that. It has a label E1, and it's separate from the main case packet. It's about 9 pages. So between that, what you have, what the commission has now before it for consideration is in the main case packet, also labeled E1. You have the public hearing draft ordinance, amending Title 21. And that begins on page 29 of the packet. Secondly, you have the November 1 staff report memo, which contains 6 recommended amendments to the public hearing draft ordinance. That staff report memo, with its amendments numbered 1 through 6, you can find those amendments numbered 1 through 6 on pages 8 and 9, 8 and 9 of your main packet. So you have the public hearing draft ordinance, 6 recommended staff amendments from the staff report, and then the third item before you for consideration is the issue response memo. It included responses to 11 issues heard from the public and questions from commissioners. Those are numbered 1 through 11 in the issue response memo. As a result of the staff review of 3 of those issues, issue responses number 5, number 6, and number 11, the recommendations for those 3 issue responses also recommend amendments to the public hearing draft. So you basically have before you 3 items: the public hearing draft, the staff report memo with 6 changes to the ordinance, and then this issue response memo, excuse me, with 3 issue responses recommending further amendments, issue responses number 5, number 6, and number 11. The remaining 8 issue responses, there were no recommended amendments. Staff would also appreciate if the commission could entertain making a correction to the title of the public hearing draft ordinance. You find the public hearing draft ordinance beginning on page 29 of your main staff packet. It would be on the 5th line of the title of the ordinance. The amendment would be to correct the chapter number that's being referenced on line 5, to correct it from 21.15.040 to just 21.15. That's just to get rid of the 040 and help us out there. So slight technical edit there. So we'd appreciate if the commission could include that in its amendments this evening. There are 2 possibilities. If the commission finds it has few or no concerns about the materials for review, it could move forward to the main motion. If the commission finds that there are concerns about the staff recommended amendments 1 through 6 in the staff report, or concerns about some of the issue responses or recommendations in those issue responses, or commissioners have concerns about other parts of the ordinance not covered by those, one option that the commission has in that scenario is to go into a committee of the whole, which allows the commission to discuss those issues in a more informal, free manner, and determine what to recommend on each item while in the committee of the whole. That would require a motion and a vote to go into the committee of the whole, and also a motion to vote to come out of the committee of the whole. And the commission would, if the commission has decided to recommend any changes while it was in the committee of the whole, and the commission would just proceed as normal with motions and amendments as needed. For example, if the commissioners wish to make a motion to make some kind of deviation or change to one of the staff recommended amendments, that they would make a motion to do so and then speak to that motion so that the commission can provide its findings as to its rationale for those. But that would occur after coming out of the committee of the whole. And that is what I have for the commission to begin with. Are there any questions?
Okay, with no questions, it looks like we might be ready for a motion. What's the will of the body? There's a motion from Commissioner Ron.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'll start stumbling through the motion and appreciate assistance where it'll be needed. In case number 2021-0111, Title 21 Text Amendment to R2 Zones Height and Bulk Standards, I move the Commission approve according to department findings and recommendations. And here I'd appreciate some assistance. What should we be referring to exactly? Of course, noting that there's been a request to amend language on page 29 of 87, striking the .040 on line 5. Looks like starting on page 8 of the staff packet are the department recommendations. And do we also need to incorporate by reference the amendments made within the subpacket E1, or are those? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Smiley. That's items 5, 6, and 11 in subpacket E1.
Okay, it looks like that motion was seconded by Radhika. Commissioner Krishna do you need any clarification on the motion? Yes, my understanding is the motion is a recommendation for approval, and Commissioner Ron, correct me if I miss anything, and that recommendation is to include the suggested amendment to the title of the ordinance on page 29 of the November 1st staff packet. That also includes the recommended amendments from staff in that November 1st packet, as well as the recommended amendments in the December 6th comment and issue response summary.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. Okay, I apologize for the delay. Staff, does that motion as written up there, is that adequate for your understanding?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or comments on the motion? Commissioner O'Quinn.
Yes, so just to, I plan to support the motion generally. Well, I guess I plan to support the motion. I just wanted to have a little bit further discussion on the administrative site plan review component. We heard a lot of testimony from folks opposed to that provision. I understand that the planning department supports it remaining in the ordinance. We didn't hear much from developers, and I think what we've seen just, at least anecdotally, is that there is a market for three-story development in that specific neighborhood that was from which we heard opposition to this testimony. So it seems that that would be a natural development and a natural thing that might occur as a result of providing for this administrative site plan review. And I was just wondering, I don't know if it's appropriate at this time as a point of order for staff to discuss that, what kind of market trends they've seen or inquiries they've had from the development community. But I'd like to just understand a little bit more about the likelihood of there being three-story development through this administrative site plan review process.
Yes, through the chair. We have seen three-story development of duplexes and single-family homes in other zoning districts in the Anchorage Bowl in recent years, several of which have been right around near South Addition, one in Fairview, three-story duplex, and then one in South Addition actually, and I believe it's an R3 or R4 zone development with multiple single-family structures on one lot. We believe that that type of development is occurring and would be likely to occur in the R2 zones. Would just open up more opportunities for that type of development. We've received a lot of support for the three-story amendment and a lot of interest in it from the Anchorage Home Builders Association. And we've also received general, estimates or guess estimates or averages of just the costs per unit of having to either excavate down to put the third story far enough below grade to avoid it being counted as a story, to stay under the 2.5 height limit, or the cost of altering the third story, its roof structure, in order to make it count as only a half story. The cost estimates we received of those exceed the fee of an administrative site plan review by a large amount per unit, the cost per unit. So you can imagine, the cost per unit is much lower and would seem to justify for a developer who wants to go through the administrative site plan review process to have it designed and go through that process. So we believe that there is opportunity there. Thank you.
Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, through the chair. Just briefly speaking to my motion, I do intend to support, would like to, for the record, note thanks to staff for going back and taking a look at the things that both the public and the commission asked, providing context specific to those requests, and also additional information about the thinking that went into those particular issues. So thank you for that. Nothing else.
Okay, I'll just add, I think as well, similarly, I also really appreciate the effort that's gone into this from staff in responding to our questions. And one of the items I know that was of particular concern was how the administrative, or rather the criteria for the administrative site plan review for buildings that didn't meet the setback requirements, or the, sorry, I think I phrased that wrong, but that I lost the exact language, but that wouldn't otherwise qualify under this proposed amendments, and I think that with these amendments, I appreciate that it helps clarify that criteria and ensures that the bulk and height transition standards are clearly a part of that, and will help make them fit within the particular neighborhood that they're in. Okay, seeing no other comments, we'll call the vote.
Mr. Strike?
This is a continuation from the 11-1 meeting of which I was not present, so I would be recused from voting.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes. Next item is item number 2. This is 2021-0120. I don't know that there's any additional materials that prepared, but if staff is able to, it might be helpful to provide kind of a brief summary of what this was and what the current status is again.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just as a brief synopsis, this is a text amendment to establish cleanup standards for contaminated soils discovered during the subdivision process. This particular ordinance was introduced by Assemblymember John Weddleton at the Anchorage Assembly and then remanded back to Planning and Zoning Commission and Plating Board for review. It has since, the timeline that this has gone before Planning and Zoning, it was initially heard before Planning and Zoning on November 1st, and the Commission's recommendation at that time was for approval. Then it came to the attention of the Planning Department that we had an error in processing and that this was actually supposed to go before Plating Board first, since it affects Chapter 8, and then Plating Board is tasked with issuing a recommendation to both Planning and Zoning Commission and the Assembly. So in order to ensure proper process on that, the Planning and Zoning Commission rescinded its approval on November 8th. It has since gone before the Plating Board on December 1st, and we do have the findings of fact from the Plating Board to share with you this evening, and that is under Supplementary Packet 1. And the recommendation from the Plating Board for this ordinance was for denial. And they do have 3 findings of fact to support their recommendation, and it was a unanimous decision. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Did we receive a copy of that denial in our packets? Or is that available?
Through the chair, there should have been a packet included, a copy of it. Sure, let me go check out front, Mr. Chair, and I'll see if maybe the extra copies were placed out there.
Thank you. Okay, so for those commissioners that are looking for it on the computer, I think it's available if you go to the star for current items, and then the three little dots in the top right corner, and you can go to documents. I see Commissioner Ron in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to confirm all commissioners now have a copy of the recommendation from the Plotting Board. It looks like we're seeing some verbal head nods. Otherwise, I'd be happy to read, but probably not necessary.
It looks like we all have a copy, although Commissioner Strike doesn't, but I believe he is recused from this matter.
Oh, and Mr. Chair, I just have one comment to make. And I apologize for the interruption. My request to speak button is not working this evening.
Go ahead, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify too, because initially at the Planning Board, it had come to my attention that it was a little unclear exactly with staff's recommendations, were staff's recommendations amendments to current code, or exactly what was going on. So just to clarify, this entire section of code will be brand new. The original language for the ordinance as proposed by Assemblymember John Weddleton is on pages 4 and 5 of the staff report, with staff amendments to that amendment on page 2. So with staff's recommendations on page 2, those are amendments to the amendment. That is all.
And so to clarify, is staff's recommendation, notwithstanding the findings from the Planning Board, is staff still recommending approval with those amendments to the amendment?
That is correct. The same recommendation went before Planning Board. So yes, recommendation from staff still stands.
And I guess I'm just curious, just looking at the findings here, I'm wondering if staff has any comments on any of the findings in particular. I guess to start, number one, suggests that this might limit flexibility to developers to choose from different soil contamination cleanup options that might otherwise be available under state code. And does staff have a thought or view on that?
Through the chair, so the discussion mainly hinged upon, there's two big soil contamination, two land use types that are fairly notorious with soil contamination, and those are gas stations and dry cleaners. Some of those older uses Say instead of doing total site remediation and cleanup, they do institutional controls and install monitoring wells. That would be an option if it was found that, you know, there is no immediate threat as long as the contamination is contained and monitored over a number of years. That option would go away under the proposed ordinance. So the planning board felt that, you know, the more tools that are available to developers, the better. And if you think, you know, to the industrial parts of town, if you do have land that is subdivided and there is contamination on site, that could negatively affect the ability of that land to be used or the cost of redevelopment of that land.
Commissioner Polis?
Do you have any elaboration on the second finding? The municipality's ability to require a higher cleanup standard. I believe that's what, you know, we heard testimony about was at one time or another, somebody had recommended a higher cleanup value that wasn't attainable, and that's kind of my question there. Is there any criteria on that?
Through the chair, I would just offer some of the discussion again at planning board was, you know, as a public entity, you know, the municipality, wouldn't we want a higher standard for any land that we would now be accepting under our ownership? If it was not cleaned up to a high enough standard and, you know, there's liability issues that come along with that. There's also ongoing maintenance costs that can go along with that, you know, with expenditures of, you know, say something was previously approved to have institutional controls and the municipality is now bearing some kind of burden on, you know, paying for that monitoring or paying for that encapsulation. Or there's quite a few different scenarios you could run through, but that's mainly what it hinged upon, is that as the municipality, wouldn't we want a higher standard for lands that we would now be accepting?
Thank you, I get that. Basically, like if something is being monitored and the city wants to buy it, they probably wouldn't want to accept continuing paying for that kind of stuff and can require a different way of cleaning it up before purchasing the property or something. Okay.
Commissioner Polis, were you still in the queue for anything, or were you? Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the commission has the opportunity to reopen a public hearing. In this instance, I haven't heard warranting of that action by the commission. I appreciate what staff has updated us on with respect to the plating board's recommendation for denial. I'm confident in moving forward with calling the question and putting a motion on the table, but I don't want to be too presumptive. Mr. Chair, would you be willing to poll the public and see if anyone is here in the interest of this case?
Yeah, I've got no issue with that, given the crowd here. Is anyone here interested in or on behalf of this matter? Looks like the answer to that is no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I don't want to hog the floor as far as making motions, but I'm happy to do one last one for the night on this case. Actually,
Commissioner O'Quinn might have a question before we get to that point.
Yeah, so just kind of, if I can talk through this with some of the other members, we were, this motion was brought before us. It was proposed by the Assembly to solve what appears to be a very specific problem. And, the intention was to kind of remove some questions about, who has the final say on some of these matters. And maybe this is a little bit of I don't want to insult anyone, but maybe a little clumsy way to address that problem. But would it be possible to amend the recommendation from the staff to include a provision to allow for institutional controls? So, either allow for the DEC regulations to prevail or for some sort of institutional controls to prevail or something like that?
Through the chair, that's certainly possible. The commission is welcome to make, propose any amendments and vote upon those as they see fit. The one thing I would caution about going down the road of allowing institutional controls is that institutional controls have a cost associated with it and a risk associated with it because the contamination still remains on site. It's not removed from the site and cleaned up properly. So, the original intention of the language proposed by Assemblymember John Weddleton was that institutional controls could not be allowed. And it is the feelings of the planning department that prohibition on institutional controls for this type of scenario should remain.
Do we have any information about how many sites are under institutional control within the municipality?
Through the chair, that information certainly exists, but I don't have it. That's all DEC's purview.
So I think ultimately, the public brought testimony before us that, demonstrated sort of this nonsensical requirement that was forced upon them because of the existing, just vague power that the municipality had to insist on whatever they, whoever was in charge that day decided they wanted to do. So I think I'm in support of I recognize the somewhat clumsy nature of this as a tool, but I'm generally in favor of referencing the DEC standards.
Okay, so just to remind the commission, we don't yet have a motion on the table, and if the commission were to consider changing the recommendation to include institutional controls, I think it would, I would suggest having a motion based on the original recommendation and then considering a motion to amend that to give us the flexibility in how we approach this. Okay, it looks like we have a motion by Commissioner Ron.
Yes, through the chair, in case 2021-0120, text amendments to AMC Title 21, Sections 2108-050 improvements and Section 2108-060 subdivision agreements to clarify soil contamination cleanup requirements. I move that the commission approve according to department recommendations on page 1 and 2 of the staff packet.
Okay, and that motion is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Commissioner Ron, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Poulos, I appreciate your interest in trying to find perhaps what would be considered threading the needle with respect to flexibility. That said, I am not a DEC regulator. I don't see this commission as being one. My original position when we heard this case the first time was to that point that DEC and state regulation is in place for a reason to do just that, what it does. What we've heard tonight by staff, a reflection of the plating board meeting, which I, as a member of the public, listened into to better understand what we might be hearing tonight, I believe is accurately reflected in their findings. in terms of negatively inhibiting flexibility, understanding that there is an interest to better understand the process. Title 21 is not the place to do that with the language that has been brought before us today. It also does limit the municipality's, perhaps inadvertently, ability to manage a situation according to the conditions of that situation. And again, the issue which I spoke to late that night on the 1st was around duplication of requirement. So for those reasons, I do not intend to support the motion. Thanks.
Okay, I think I'll just go ahead and add, oh, sorry, I see Commissioner Spinelli here in the queue.
Yeah, I guess I thought I should chime in on this. The bringing up of the institutional controls, I see that as definitely limiting development possibilities. And so I think that this whole thing was crafted, and you both have kind of summed it up in a way that wasn't perfectly appropriate for soils cleanup standards. And the fact that the institutional controls are going to limit the ability, I think that I am not going to support the motion either. And let's leave it at that.
I'll just note for my own self as well, I think I probably will not support it at this point either. It seems, we did hear testimony from the public that there was an issue that at least one person experienced with understanding or dealing with a level of cleanup that was required by the city. Initially, I did support the motion, but seeing the findings from the planning board and the discussion here today, it's apparent to me that there are aspects of this type of regulation that I don't fully understand, and it's not clear how it will always necessarily play out, and I don't see the benefit of locking ourselves in a way that potentially limits those options when this is a standard that would already be present under state law. And Commissioner Polis.
I came in here intending to approve that motion, and then when I finally read that packet, I started asking myself questions, and I can see how the muni would want to protect themselves with the whole institutional controls, and I also see how the developer would be impacted by that being taken away from them. So I just don't think I have enough information to say that I would support that. So I'm going to say I will not support this motion.
Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, we'll call the vote. Okay, so that motion fails. Next item on the agenda is case 2021-0126. The public hearing is closed in this matter. I didn't know if there was any additional information from staff that they would like to provide regarding the status of this.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just give a brief overview of the process here. So Planning and Zoning Commission did have a work session and a public hearing on November 8th, and they postponed decision on this particular item to allow the Planning Board to review Section 15, which pertains to text amendments to Chapter 8 of Title 21. Planning Board did recommend approval unanimously. However, we don't have an official findings of fact adopted yet to share with the Commission this evening. And then in re-listening to the public hearing on the 8th, there was sort of two outstanding questions. There were some concerns about the addition of private aircraft hangars being developed within all zoning districts, being a permitted use within all zoning districts. But what I would like to bring to the commission's attention is the use-specific standards for private residential aircraft hangars. Is that both the principal use or structure and the accessory use or structure are developed in conjunction with a legally established airstrip. In addition to, of course, compliance with all required setbacks, and that the accessory use shall only serve the residents of the property and shall not be used for commercial purposes or as part of a home occupation. There was some concern as well about the size of the private residential aircraft hangars, being that, it does allow the size of the aircraft hangar to not exceed the gross floor area of the principal structure by more than 200%. And that is quite a large allowance, but at the same time, aircraft are quite large. So if you're going to be storing your aircraft, working on your aircraft, things are large and a lot of space is generally needed. So we're not proposing any changes to the use-specific standards for private residential aircraft hangars. This is simply just an oversight when code was originally drafted that it wasn't included in the table of allowed uses. And then referencing going back to section 13, there was some discussion about what happens to a gravel driveway that is allowed under this proposed exception if the gravel street then is paved. And what would happen is, the gravel driveway would be allowed to remain until such time as the property is redeveloped. But once that street was paved, any existing driveways would then get a driveway apron put in. The length of that apron would only be within the right-of-way, so just go to the edge of the right-of-way. There, as part of those road projects, improvements to private residences are not allowed typically. So that's why that driveway apron won't extend onto property, but it would go to the edge of, edge of property. And I believe those are the only notes I have written down that needed to be specified for this evening. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Oh, I see Commissioner Krishna in the queue. Is that a holdover? Okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you. I do have a question about Section 4, the aircraft hangars. And my question is thank you for mentioning that in the accessory use standards, they are, it says they will be developed in conjunction with a legally established airstrip. And my question really is, going to the table of allowed uses, if you look at private airstrips, they're conditionally allowed in a number of lower density residential uses, and they're only a permitted use in a single district, which I believe is a military zoning district. And my question is simply, would staff have any objections to mirroring those those conditional or permitted uses for aircraft, for the hangars to be the same as the private airstrips?
Through the chair, I do believe I don't know if we necessarily have an objection to that, but I think we would discourage that just because you have a lot of legally non-conforming airstrips throughout the municipality that might be zoned in a zone under current code where an airstrip isn't allowed. So, for example, say you had an airstrip that was put in the 50s before that area of town was even zoned. Now any resident living along that airstrip that's been there, that's been legally established, that is allowed to remain until such time as it's redeveloped, those residents can't make use of this and get an aircraft hangar of their own.
If I might ask a follow-up question, I think I would ask, in some of our higher density zoning districts, this could be a significantly, a use that frankly I would find incompatible, especially if it was a new newly developed, even if it was alongside a existing airstrip, and I wonder how staff would respond to that.
Through the chairs, is the, are your thoughts that perhaps it would just be such a large structure that it wouldn't necessarily be incompatible, or exactly where was the, could you
Yeah,
clarify
I
the
think,
question?
I think the question is, would this being added make it possible for someone to develop a new hangar in a district that might not have otherwise allowed that?
So through the chair, what this amendment would do is it would clarify, exactly where these accessory aircraft hangars could be placed. Because right now we don't have that clarification in code. And then two, it's always accessory. So there's always going to be an existing principal structure, a residence there that would have been there. Or perhaps a new single-family home, but there's always going to be a principal use there, and this aircraft hangar will always be accessory to it. So I don't necessarily feel that it would bring any sort of incompatibility because the neighborhood would still remain residential. It would still be an aircraft-oriented community along an airstrip. So I guess, my initial reactions is I don't foresee any major incompatibilities resulting from this. Just given where these are going to practically and functionally be placed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify my previous disclosure. I misspoke earlier. The case that I listened to the audio on was this current case, 0126.
Thank you, Commissioner Spinelli. Commissioner O'Quinn, or I guess Pullis.
Circling back on Commissioner Krishna's question, basically like the max structural coverage of the lot and stuff of a residential lot, that would still apply with the accessory use. So it'd have to be a pretty big lot for them to put an airport on and to only cover 10, 15% of the lot, right? I mean, it's a special situation, it seems, no matter what, to be able to put a hangar on your lot.
Through the chair, that's correct, and that's a great point as well.
Commissioner O'Quinn.
So regarding existing legally non-conforming, airstrip uses, would this apply to like waterfront property as well? Like could someone build a hangar, say on Campbell Lake? I don't know if the HOA allows that, but if it does, would that be a place that a hangar is allowed to be built?
So Campbell Lake is an interesting one. We did deal with a situation where a gentleman wanted to put a helipad on his property, and Campbell Lake is an FAA registered, landing strip. And now that I'm recalling the situation, I'm realizing I can't quite recall the exact details of it, but certainly it's a seaplane base there on Campbell Lake, so you're going into other issues like constructing structures on a waterfront, which brings into a whole host of other issues. So the only real structure that you could build would be like a heliport. You can't take your aircraft unless you were to lift it out of the water and tow it onto your property and put it in an aircraft hangar. But my assumption is likely yes, you could, but without any more specifics, broadly speaking, yes, I would assume it's possible.
Okay, so with no further questions, it looks like we would be looking for a motion to get started in this case. Commissioner O'Quinn.
In the matter of case number 2021-0126, recommend approval of an omnibus ordinance amending several sections of AMC Title 21 to align Title 21 with current practices and to provide clarity for the implementation of the code and related matters as they appear in our staff report.
Okay, and that motion is seconded by Commissioner Polis. Commissioner O'Quinn, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Plan to support the motion. I think the planning department did a remarkable job of some significant housekeeping that was in order. I think they've addressed all of the concerns that have been brought before them, at least that I had, and so I plan to support the motion.
Commissioner Krishna, I'm not sure if your name is still on the list from before. We've had some issues with the listing here, but if you have comments, feel free.
Sure, it is from before, but given the opportunity to comment, I will, and I agree, I will also be supporting this motion. I think I want to thank staff for the significant discussion on all of these items, and I agree that by and large this will be a improvement and clean up several aspects of code that I think will benefit us. I also want to note that we had quite a few comments from the public in support, many with very detailed comments, so I think that's really helpful to all of us here. Thank you.
Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, through the chair. In general, I agree with the comments by commissioners made thus far. I do appreciate the work done by staff in terms of housekeeping and cleanup. I also apologize for not bringing this into discussion prior to a motion being on the floor, but when we first discussed this, I believe Commissioner Strike and I had some similar thoughts around Section 8, and that's the storage of an accessory vehicle language being added as an attempt to give teeth to enforcement. And I'm still, to use a pun, on the fence about that. Not sure which side of the fence I'd like to be on, and I think I've been on both, as we all have. And I'm just struggling. It feels like there's a more elegant solution, but I don't know what it is. Perhaps it's this. We see how it lands, and if it needs to be revised thereafter, so be it. 14 days just seems like a very short period of time. I've had family members and friends go for trips out of state, much longer than that, being asked to keep a vehicle on the premises. Those are my thoughts on the matter. Again, I don't have a better solution at this stage, unless, of course, we could pull that and workshop it in a different manner.
Commissioner Polis?
I will second Commissioner Ron's hesitance on the camper parking in the driveway question. I'm assuming I'm going to sign myself up for a ticket with that one because my camper sits probably more than 2 weeks once in a while. I also thought it was weird that the getting rid of the architectural landscape stuff got in there and nobody knows where it came from. Definitely don't support that. But the rest of the motion I support, and that's how it's written in the packet, so I support this motion.
And I guess that reminds me that maybe worth clarifying, Commissioner Quinn, that did your motion include the recommended amendments that staff had included in the packet?
Yes.
Okay, seeing no further comments, and I don't see one from Commissioner Strike as well, we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion passes. Okay, so next up is our one public hearing item. I'll go ahead and read the procedure for the public hearings. This is the procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meeting. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. That is, petitioners, including all representatives, receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., receive 5 minutes. Individuals will receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. The case before us that we have set for public hearing is 2021-01119. This is a review and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Assembly of the public hearing draft for our Downtown Anchorage Downtown District Plan 2021. Can we hear from staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I am Christine Bunnell for the record, the Planning Manager for the Long Range Planning Division in the Planning Department. I am here tonight to represent the update to the Downtown Comprehensive Plan. First of all, I would like to thank a large group of folks, including the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, the Downtown Community Council, the Fairview Community Council, Government Hill Community Council, the Third Avenue Radicals, Anchorage Economic Development Corporation, the Anchorage Chamber, ACDA, 49th State Brewery for hosting our events, the Anchorage Museum for also hosting, Bettisworth North, Agnew Beck, and Huddle AK. I couldn't have done this project, or our team couldn't have done this project without the help of all those folks. I am here tonight to listen to comments from the Commission and the public as the department moves through the recommendation and approval process of the updated plan. The plan update was guided by AMC 2107-070B2, Targeted Update of Comprehensive Plans. The Planning and Zoning Commission is scheduled to take public comment on the public hearing draft tonight and at their regular commission meeting, and included in the packet for your review was the public hearing draft plan, comment response table, and staff memo. We also included the PowerPoint presentation from the work session tonight. Staff recommendations and amendments for consideration by the Commission were included in the staff memo in the comment response table. After the public hearing closes, the Commission will deliberate the matter and forward its recommendations to the Assembly by resolution. The Downtown Plan will be adopted as an element of the Comprehensive Plan in the Anchorage Bowl section, AMC 21.01.080 in Table 2101-1, Comprehensive Plan Elements. The work session that we had tonight briefly discussed the requirements of code for the targeted review of the plan at 10-year intervals. The 2007 Downtown Comprehensive Plan was updated pursuant to code with the planning process, considering the 4 contributing elements as required. This includes the latest demographic information, economic information, land use decisions, relative relevant to the planning area and any contributing plans or studies. Each of these 4 elements are addressed in the plan and receive supporting goals and policies. The economic forecast for the downtown area is job growth, business retention, and new services for downtown remains positive despite the pandemic shutdown, according to AEDC forecasts used for the plan update. A gradual rebound of our economy is expected. Downtown and Anchorage as a whole has hundreds of open positions when filled will greatly contribute to growth in our economy. Agnew Beck completed an existing housing study which included recent downtown demographic information, the cost of housing and population as compared to other downtowns. The demographic information shows we are losing residents due to many factors including jobs, retirements, or aging population. However, the long-term projections state Anchorage's population will turn around and begin to grow. Several land use decisions, including tax abatements and the downtown code reformat and the adoption of several plans, were used for this planning effort. Those include the Ship Creek Framework Plan, the original 4 Neighborhoods Historic Preservation Plan, and the Fairview Neighborhood Plan. And I think you guys asked me about that at our work session. Contributing plans and studies are those efforts that are not adopted by the Assembly but were completed to provide direction to the use and development of the area. The former Native Hospital Site Master Plan, the Gamble Street Corridor Study, and the Anchor Home Homeless Plan were completed after 2007 and also contributed to this plan update. We talked a little bit about a revitalization strategy, which is in Chapter 3, and then we also talked about the land use plan map, which was in Chapter 4 during our work session. And I appreciate the comments and the questions that you all had about that. Implementing the plan, we're already in the process of implementing part of the plan. We've hired Bettisworth North to complete several visualizations of development for existing properties downtown. We showed you those visualizations during the work session. Bettisworth North is also completing a capacity study on several vacant or underused lots as part of one of the action items in the plan. We will use this information to help us with updating the downtown code. We would like to bring that finished study back to the Commission as an informational item when that's completed early next year. We had a robust public engagement process, which we talked a little bit about. I reported out monthly to the Downtown Community Council and also to the Fairview Community Council. We met about 3 different times on the planning process. We had personal one-on-one interviews. We had 2 subcommittees, an online survey, and subsequent follow-up working group processes. This is already a living plan and thanks to the support from the downtown agencies, partners, and residents, which I previously mentioned. We received many helpful comments on the plan, with several that will be used for the downtown zoning code update. Edits will be made where we thought those edits helped. Downtown does have design guidelines, which are just that, guidelines. We talked a little bit about that earlier. The downtown code in Title 21 is what will direct what buildings look like downtown. We fully appreciate the recommendations anticipate recommendations from the capacity study to help us again with the downtown code update. On page 4 of your packet, there are the department's recommendations for the plan and several findings. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, the comment response table is part of your packet when you get ready to make a motion for approval. Thank you.
I guess I'll go ahead and start off with just one question. This follows up on a question I asked earlier with respect to the downtown streets engineering study. Just because from my perspective, I think the details of how that's scoped will probably play a big role in kind of what comes out of that, which will be really, it seems to be a significant part of this plan. And I was wondering, both for our benefit and the benefit of anyone listening or present here today, if you could give some more details about what that process looks like for determining the scope, and specifically how people could have an opportunity to provide input on that scope.
Thank you. I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair. So the Downtown Streets Engineering Study is identified on page 120 of the plan. And it's identified as action item T and C1. And what it says is fund and complete the Downtown Streets Engineering Study to implement the recommendations of the engineering study that can occur quickly without too much funding. Include the following action items in the scope of the engineering study. So we're looking at TNC2, which is the pedestrian-friendly streets project. And that talks about the signal timing. So in the study, we would look at the signal timing on the streets between A and L and 9th to 3rd to see if we need to adjust the signal timing to slow traffic down a little bit and make it more pedestrian-friendly as folks walk along the street there. TC3 is Historic 3rd Avenue Bikeway Pilot Project. We talked a little bit about this at the work session. We have property owners that are along 3rd Avenue that would like to see some kind of a bike route. They're referring to 3rd Avenue as a historic corridor, which it is. It has part of the, some of the original buildings that were built in Anchorage in 1915 along that street. And so including the 3rd Avenue with a potential bikeway pilot project would be something that we would be considered in that scope. TNC4 is the Coastal Trail Connector. So we would be looking at the Coastal Trail Connector in the study to see how we could make that happen and where we could make that happen. TC7 is fund and publish a parking study. We would be looking at the parking that's also in the downtown area, somewhat, not a large part of the study would be devoted to that, but identify where parking could help us with traffic circulation and different things like that, and where the parking garages are and how those contribute in the traffic circulation. TC9 is included as a public outreach program to folks that live and live outside of downtown and then come into downtown. Is there a way for us to have an outreach program to maybe get commuters to van share and different things like that? So that would be considered in that study. TC11 would look at funding, prioritizing and funding snow plowing of all bicycle lanes and trails. What are we doing right now to make that happen? And then what else could we do to make that happen? We're a year-round city where people like to ride their bicycles, so making sure that that folks can do that and get to work on their bicycles is an important part of that study too. And then I also included TNC 18, which includes prioritizing the infrastructure funding and improvements in the focused development areas and cultural districts. So if we do come up with something where a roadway potentially or a sidewalk would need to be reconstructed to help make the entire downtown system work, then we would be able to prioritize that and include that in the scope.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, through the chair. Ms. Bunnell, thank you again for the work session that you led earlier and calling to attention the commissioners some of the key points and providing some context about the work that went into the plan in its current draft. In that work session, I hopefully accurately reflected, if not I will, here my interest as an Anchorageite in seeing our community being vibrant and healthy in all the ways that it can be defined, both environmentally and economically. All that said, as we talked about earlier, we're living in a time that still seems very uncertain. And while this plan, I think, makes great strides at being supportive of a recovery, I'm interested in the alternative scenario and how this plan could maintain some flexibility if growth projections aren't met, and there are factors outside the control of this plan that make some of those base assumptions for the planning that's been done inaccurate. What happens then?
So I'm trying to repeat back what I think I heard. What happens if things maybe don't change and the economy doesn't do what we think it's going to do?
To use a specific example with respect to the recommendations in the form of T's and C's, have those been evaluated from the standpoint of this makes sense under this growth scenario? This doesn't make sense if we don't meet certain conditions.
Well, a plan like this is a big picture. It's a big umbrella that allows the community to kind of share their dreams of what they would like a downtown to be. And like we talked about a little bit earlier in the work session, in 2007, when the plan was adopted, Anchorage was in pretty good shape financially. Houses were being built, things were going along pretty good, oil was still happening. And then the 2008 recession started, and that slowly crept up here to the Alaska, to the Anchorage area too. We don't have control over what those outside influences are. We don't have control over our tourists going to come. Our developers like Spinell Homes or Hultquist or Sean Debenham, who's looking to build some new apartments in downtown area. The market is going to support some things. There's going to be market development. I mean, the Cuddy family developed some very large townhouses over on their historic family property that they have along 9th Avenue. The railroad is incrementally going along and developing the townhouses that they're doing on the rail. So some of this is going to be market demand, but also some of it is going to be the incentives that the muni is going to be able to offer and continue offering, and the risk that developers are going to be willing to take. We know that we need housing downtown to help it be more vibrant, and the more housing that we can bring in, we're going to see vibrancy start. We're going to see that happen. The engineering streets study is important. Like I mentioned, all these projects were listed in 2007. A lot of them didn't happen. We specifically asked the community, should those street projects still be in this plan? And if you look at the online survey results, which are again on our website, you can see that a large percentage of the answers to all of those questions were yes. Those need to still stay in. So what we can do with the street study, for example, is we can get that done. We can make those recommendations, and then we can use the AMAT's tip to incrementally fund those street projects. And again, like I said, we're working on the incentives. We want to extend the incentive date for the Fairview one, and also for the housing one. That's going to expire too in 2024. So there's tools that we can do. We've got a gap working group that we're meeting with right now. How do we figure out this gap funding? What kind of things can we try and do that the community would agree with? Right now, we can't bond for like market rate housing, but is the community willing to allow us to maybe change our code to allow bonding for housing? So this plan is quite aspirational, and it was built on what people wanted. Not what Christine Bunnell wanted. And so I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry if it's a long answer, but maybe if Amanda wants to help out on answering that question too. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this item? Go ahead and come on up. And I think there's an option to turn the mic on there. It's the little speaking voice looking symbol. And if you could please state your name for the record and identify if you're speaking as an individual or on behalf as a representative of a group.
Good evening, commissioners and planning staff. My name is Anita Baker. My comments are my own private comments. I am not representing any organization this evening. I have lived in Anchorage for the past 21 years. I have read our downtown Anchorage plan and the Trends report. First, I support the revitalization of downtown. However, I am concerned that this plan does not adequately address the natural hazards associated with the presence of seismic hazard zones 4 and 5, high ground failure susceptibility and very high ground failure susceptibility, and the presence of the Bootlegger Cove Special Landslide Hazard Area in the downtown area. Also, the downtown area is at a higher risk of a hazardous material incident due to its close proximity to the Port of Alaska, J-Bear, and the Ship Creek Industrial Area. I am especially concerned about housing in this high-risk area. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good day, Commissioners. Testifying on behalf of a group.
Can you state your name for the record? And I'm sorry?
Niall Sherwood Williams.
Okay. And what group are you speaking on behalf of?
The Community Council of the Body of Jesus Christ.
Go ahead.
So in response to the 15-minute monologue from my right-hand side over there, I don't respect planning that seeks to destroy my community. You want to revitalize downtown? Wake up. You're trying to eliminate parking lots to have more parking garages, saying that's going to be safer? No, that's where the rapes happen. That's where the assaults happen. That's where people are put in the back of vans and child sex trafficking happens. So let's stop that. Let's stop the child sex trafficking. Let's stop the drug dealing in downtown Anchorage. Another thing we could do to revitalize downtown, open up the damn people mover station. Stop making people freeze to death outside while they're waiting for buses. Another thing we could do to revitalize downtown, stop kicking off women and infant children when the buses stop for 10 minutes so the bus driver can smoke a cigarette or shit or piss. It's quite clear that this is nothing more than communist handler plans. I noticed that we're putting already this silica shit in the ground downtown by 4th and Cordova. Some type of fake ground. You got the most beautiful dirt in all of the world right here. What the hell are you doing polluting it? Stop letting them do it. In Jesus' name. You want to talk about revitalizing downtown?
Sir, can you please refrain from the language? If you could keep your language more appropriate for the public setting, I'd appreciate that. And also, if you have
pause
comments,
my time if you're going to continue to.
That's fine. And if you have comments that are specific to the specific plan in front of us, that would be more useful to the commission in considering it.
Yeah. So the downtown district plan, I'd like for a complete investigation into Christopher Constant, the representative for downtown, into bribes and racketeering going on between him and the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, corporations and hotels. I'd like to have investigations be done on how women are being run from Captain Cook Hotel to the Hilton, in between the Anchorage Museum. The FBI is helping to run them around downtown.
Thank you for your
Please
comments.
stop interrupting me. My freedom of the speech is a First Amendment right. New York Times versus Sullivan. Maybe you haven't been made aware of that yet, but every time you interrupt me, it's a $10,000 fine for the municipality. So stop. I'd like one member of this body to suspend this indefinitely, to cancel the plan, expose the drug dealers and child sex traffickers.
Okay.
Good evening. Through the chair, my name is Amanda Moser, and I'm the Executive Director of Anchorage Downtown Partnership. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight to Our Downtown Plan. I'd like to start by thanking the Planning Department for the work that they've done over the past 2 years to really capture the voice of our community. Through their extensive public process, they really captured the robust and diverse voices of the different stakeholders in the downtown area. And downtown is really a unique space in our community. It is the heart of our city. It belongs to everyone. It's where we come together, we celebrate, we connect, and we occasionally commiserate. And so it's a very important component. And so really grateful for all the time and effort that the Planning Department has put into that, and Christine specifically. Downtown has bore the brunt of the pandemic, from closures to cancellations and the mandates, but our downtown is resilient. And if we capitalize on our strengths, which is our public spaces, we really have the ability to maximize for human connection, and that is what a lot of this plan allows us to do. Currently, our downtown prioritizes vehicles over people, and we lose out on connections, and we also lose out on opportunities for commerce. And so really important to slow down traffic. If you're driving down Fifth Avenue every morning on my way to work, I hit every green light, and you can really get up to speed. But if you want people to be able to safely walk and pass through, you need to adjust those timing signals. Additionally, there are so many one-way streets in the downtown area, which moves folks outside of the downtown area. Downtowns are meant for lingering. It's meant for people to stay and to connect. We've got a lot of large trucks that pass through downtown out of the port and the Alaska Railroad. And this summer, our organization partnered with the Anchorage Museum and the Anchorage Center for Performing Arts Center. And we had Anchorage Summer Arts in the Park. And on the Anchorage Museum lawn, we had the symphony and the opera. And it was these amazing experiences where people were outside and connecting after the long winter months and after the year of pandemic, and we had a beautiful soprano aria, and all of a sudden you just hear, a big 18-wheeler just downshift going on out, and it just really sort of, you lose out on that vibrancy when you have those large trucks passing through the downtown area. There's a handful of restaurants that have outdoor seatings, and as you have large trucks pass by, it really takes away from that downtown community feel. Protected bike lanes. Bike lanes are good for businesses, and this is something that is nationwide and worldwide. The more that people are able to access businesses by using bikes, you see increased sales, you see folks that are staying there longer. Our downtown is surrounded by the crown jewel of our trail system, the Coastal Trail, and folks could, both visitors could come into downtown and pass in and out on the Coastal Trail, but if you are staying at the Hotel Captain Cook or the Marriott or the Hilton, there's no way to navigate this space safely. You can't ride on the sidewalks. It's illegal, and it's pretty dangerous on the streets. And so these protected bike lanes are a great way to support our local businesses, encourage active participation, and also support some of the other things that Christine was mentioning earlier. I live in Airport Heights. I would love to commute downtown, and part of the reason that I have concerns about it is that moment you get off the trails and you enter onto the roads. Also, road closures is a great way to celebrate our community, allow opportunities for community engagement, connections, and commerce. And there's a lot of roads in the downtown area that are designed and built to be shut down. For example, the F Street remodel between 6th and 7th is a great road to shut down, and you can celebrate with those 2 restaurants that flank it. It's got those great sidewalks that are the same level as streets, and so any way that we can encourage folks to be outside as we continue to navigate this uncertainty with the respiratory pandemic. And of course, wayfinding. Our downtown has our cultural centers and all sorts of hidden gems, and our downtown is also Denina land. And we have this opportunity to acknowledge the Denina history as well as celebrate the Denina people that are still here. And there's a great opportunity to do that with both wayfinding and indigenous place names. And as we talk about a vital and successful downtown, of course we need 24-hour activation, and that only means more folks living downtown. We've seen a lot of successes with Elizabeth Place and with the rail, but any way that we can incentivize more development. And we are a winter city. We're experiencing that now, so any way we can celebrate more ways to bring folks downtown in the winter. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Can I just ask you real quick, I assume you've been in discussion with the planning department through this process, but given the items that you referenced and identified, were there aspects of the proposed plan that you would like to see different, or are you just speaking generally in support of it?
I'm speaking in support. I feel like I was a pretty active participant throughout the process, and a lot of these items that I mentioned are part of the plan, and so I'm just highlighting some of the things that I'm excited about. And especially from the perspective of our organization, every year we visit our strategic plan, and a lot of these things that our board of directors has identified as part of our strategic plan as elements that are part of our downtown. There's just so much synergy between all these organizations, and this is also a little bit of what Christine mentioned, that are all sort of working to bring downtown into this really vibrant, active space.
Thank you. It looks like we've got a question from Commissioner Ron as well.
Thank you, through the chair. A couple of questions and comments. Ms. Moser, thank you for coming down tonight and sharing your involvement in the process and your support of it. I similarly share your interest in non-motorized traffic or points of access coming from Midtown. There are places in the heart of downtown, commercial establishments that I would love to go with my family in a, well, on a bike or on foot. And I agree with you that commercial transport of heavy goods is one component of that. The other is perhaps movement of people during the summer tourist season with buses as well. So that's one thing I'd be interested in hearing more from you about is how, is that of concern? If so, has it been addressed, or should it be addressed in this plan? The second one is when we're in cars and also on bikes, that mode of travel is changing a little bit as well in terms of electrification. And so is that an element of the downtown partnership that is either included or not included in this plan? If it's not included, that's something I'd like to learn more about why it wasn't. You know, e-bikes are becoming more and more popular, as are electric vehicles. So as we talk about how people move in this space, is that an element that we're accurately addressing? And I had a third tenet, but it's escaped me now, so I'll stop there and say thank you.
Okay, so the first one was sort of the separation between motor coaches bringing guests in the summer versus like the larger trucks that I was talking about sort of moving out that were going too fast and disrupting the downtown.
Yes, so our motor coach is part of that analysis and assessment. If not, why?
Well, so I'm sort of from my personal experience and in the downtown area, and this is like me talking without any data, so entering that sort of dangerous territory. My first 2 years that I lived here, I was a tour director, so I'm very familiar with the motor coaches in the downtown area. And they don't have the sort of same level of disruption that the large sort of trucks and especially like the fuel trucks do. And I think they sort of and they aren't traveling at the same rate of speeds. They aren't looking to get out of downtown. A lot of times as these motor coaches are coming into downtown, you have a tour director on board telling the folks all the places to go, and they are sort of driving slowly along. And they are mostly sort of on 4th Avenue is where they do their drop-offs, or they're going to the major hotels in the downtown area. As I'm talking about the fuel trucks, I am seeing these like high rates of speed on 3rd Avenue, 5th and 6th and A and C. And then if you look at the Vision Zero, those are like all the areas too where there's like a lot of the high incidents and accidents. And those are my concerns. And so that I think is what's making downtown less safe for pedestrians, as they're going too fast on those one-way. And I think it's a little bit different for motor coaches in the summer. And I think, we do want to prioritize public transportation, because then you are moving more people with less vehicles. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity to sort of, going on to your next one about e-bikes, we have a tremendous opportunity to sort of hit this wave as it starts cresting. And I think, this summer we saw our first business in the downtown area specifically renting out e-bikes. E-bikes make it more accessible for all riders to access trails. And we just need to make sure that those riders are protected by bike lanes and infrastructure so that they are able to get from our downtown out onto the Great Trail system. So I'm really excited that there's a lot of talk with the plan to make sure that that happens. And I can't speak to anything about the electric vehicles.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I remember my third point. It's around ADP member organizations and the experience that was encountered by some businesses this last summer or the summer past that weren't previously accessible to those businesses in terms of taking advantage of sidewalk and street space. Do you feel like this plan is honed as a tool to perhaps enable that into the future? If you can speak to that in terms of temporary solutions.
Absolutely. So through the chair, in the beginning March, April of 2020, Anchorage Downtown Partnership is part of a larger organization called the International Downtown Association. So we are a place management organization, and there is 1,000 of us worldwide. And as COVID was traveling throughout the world, we were closely tracking what other downtown communities were doing. And right away, we just started seeing that folks on the East Coast were shutting down their streets, opening up their sidewalks, and just doing everything that they could to get their businesses outside, recognizing that the more that folks were outside and sort of had stronger ventilation, it was best practices. And so we right away began the work with the city to do a pilot project. What would it look like if we did that downtown? And downtown is unique. Like the rest of Anchorage has parking requirements, and so there's parking lots that allow folks to sort of take over that space. And so downtown was a little bit unique in having to not have that sort of parking lot that you can just take over. And so sort of using the sort of shared public space. So we worked really closely with traffic engineering, and we shut down 3 roads in the summer of 2020. We shut down F Street, E Street, and G Street. And we ran a pilot project just to see what it was like, and we learned a lot. It was a huge opportunity because, it is the blessing and the curse to shut down a space. It does create additional challenges for folks that also are in that area outside of the businesses that are using that. But it created incredible vibrancy when downtown was empty. Like the summer of 2020 was devastating downtown. Everyone was working from home. We had no guests and visitors, and that was this incredible opportunity to bring folks back downtown. And so we really shared a lot of those lessons learned with the planning department, and I think a big part of how we can make that more accessible in the future to be able to do it both short-term and long-term, because there's a lot of process and challenges to kind of just shut a road down, and especially if you wanted to do it long-term. And the more we can sort of make that more accessible, and it's like in a great pilot project too. I think a lot of times when you talk about successful communities around the world, everyone loves to talk about like their favorite pedestrian space. So I spent my 21st year in Boulder, Colorado, and Pearl Street was like the hot spot, and it's, you know, and so it's like a nice way to explore what it looks like to have that kind of space.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Are you saying something to me?
Is it on? Yes.
Yeah, you're on. If you could state your name for the record and whether you're testifying as an individual.
Yeah. My name's Matt Samuel. I'm testifying as an individual. But for the record, I do work for a large property owner downtown, and I'm also on the board of the Downtown Partnership. So, thank you, Chair, Commissioners. I missed the opportunity to comment online, so I appreciate the ability to comment in person. Thank you for that. Key thing I was looking at, I like really the idea of the few good blocks between 5th and 9th and I&L Street. I think that was good to coordinate the focus, especially with the utility improvements, and to set the groundwork. However, it does still rely on individual landowners to commit to develop in the future, or for the property developers to acquire multiple lots. So I think, although we're looking for something to happen quickly, all that can take time and take many years. So I've lived in a number of cities where successful regeneration has involved the forming of a development authority, not only to acquire land, but also to fast-track planning, particularly on brownfield sites. And I noticed, thankfully, here that is a recommendation from the Smart Growth America. And I think we're in a very fortunate position that you know, on 2 counts, we already have a community development authority in place. Not only that, but they also have large tracts of land in their ownership that are, in some cases, underutilized. So I think with this good blocks, and there is mention of expanding that, there is also potentially a missed opportunity, and maybe we could look at a second few good blocks that focuses on 3rd and 4th Avenue, particularly the Muni parking lots, the 4th Avenue Mall, and the Aviator Hotel, and that area which is looking to be redeveloped, and really emphasizing the mushing district and improving the eastern gateway to downtown. So I think in order to make things happen quickly, we really have to look and encourage the Community Development Authority to develop their land and open that up. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and... Oh, I guess, yeah, does staff have any rebuttal or comments they'd like to make in light of the comments we heard from the public?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everybody that commented. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to let you know that the seismic zone map is in the plan. It was adopted in 2007. It will be adopted again in this plan, so that's not going away. And then there are some goals and policies related to seismic and how folks can build in those areas, and those are in place, as well as Title 23 that guides what's going to be developed in a seismic zone and to what extent they need to do, if they do develop there, to make sure that it's safe. Really appreciate Amanda and everything that she said. Again, the 1,200 comments that we got on the online survey reflect a lot of what the businesses desire for downtown and wanting it to be the best that it can be. And Amanda and her group of business owners down there have just done a yeoman's job in the last few years trying to keep downtown open with everything that's happened, and we really appreciate their support on the plan. As far as e-bikes go, yeah, we appreciate the fact that there are folks out there that rent bikes to our tourism, to our tourists that come and visit, and we didn't really talk about electric vehicles. We don't have gas stations in the downtown area, and but that is one thing that I think we should add to the list of what can be considered in the engineering study. We should need to talk about that in that. Thank you so much, Matt, for saying the things that you did. Just wanted to let you know that the Aviator is actually in a focused development area. So there's two of those, the big yellow kind of L shape and then the blue. And the Aviator in a lot of that area is within another focused development area. So the same kind of situation. And yeah, we have been working with ACDA to figure out. They've got new leadership now, and with the new mayor, I think they're going to be able to help us do some more redevelopment in downtown, look at their property that they have, as well as HLB. We need to be working with HLB to help them bring new development on the properties that they have downtown, because they have substantial amount of property too. So those are things on my list after we get the plan adopted to move on with. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any other questions from the commission for staff before we close the public hearing? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And with that, what is the will of the body? Motion from Commissioner Krishna.
Sure, I'll go ahead and get us started. In the matter of case 2021-0119, the 2021 Downtown District Plan, I move to recommend adoption.
That motion is seconded by Commissioner O'Quinn. Commissioner Krishna, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Sure. I think I would like to note for the record that we heard public comments in support, and we also saw an enormous amount of public comments throughout this planning process, significant engagement of local community councils. I'll make another couple of comments. Some things that I appreciate in the plan were the focus on funding tools and other policies that we can use to encourage implementation. And I also just want to note that the final chapter, the implementation table, provides a strong roadmap for how we can achieve the goals set out in this plan. So I'll leave it there.
I'll go ahead and add while seeing if any other commissioner wants to add anything. From my perspective, I think I support all of the recommended findings that were included in the staff packet, and I would add those findings as part of our resolution this evening. And I also would like to note that I think it's significant. We did receive some testimony from the public today, which is always really appreciated. But for something of this nature, and given that it's downtown that affects so many people, I think it's significant that we heard from so few people this evening. I think that reflects the impressive public process that went into this on the front end. And so I commend the planning department for that. Okay, seeing nothing further, we'll call a vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion passes. Checking the agenda here to see if we have anything further on it. I don't see that we do, so if we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved. moved by Commissioner Ron, seconded by Pulis.